Welcome to Fundraising Stories with Female Founders. I'm Julia Elliott-Brown, the founder and CEO of Enter the Arena. I'm a serial entrepreneur and an expert in raising investment and business growth. Our mission at Enter the Arena is to empower female founders to fly through pre-raise and investment and onto the exponential growth of their business with investment expertise and business coaching. Here we share the stories of inspirational female founders who've raised investment to inspire you to do the same. You'll hear their honest accounts of what it was really like to secure funding, the highs, the lows, and the challenges they experienced on the journey. And along the way, we'll discuss top tips for how you can be successful too. So today I'm speaking with the founder and CEO of Yoller, Louise Doherty. Yoller is the social planning platform that helps real friends meet up in real life really quickly. So it's all about enabling everyone in a group to agree the details of a social plan. So the who, the what, the where, and the when, so that it can actually happen. Yoller has been featured by Apple and Google as one of the best apps for socializing in over 100 countries. And its mission is to make the world happier and healthier by improving our real world relationships. So let me tell you about Louise. Now, Louise has a career background in strategic marketing. She specializes in scaling consumer digital products, and she's worked for some amazing brands, including the BBC, ASOS, Yo Sushi, and AB InBev. And really impressive progress so far. After launching Yoller just a few years ago in 2016, Louise has already been making a great impact. And in 2018, she was a finalist for the most inspirational startup founder. So it's a real privilege to be speaking to her today. Let's talk about fundraising. In 2017, Louise raised £380,000 via crowdfunding, but that's not the only funding that Louise has managed to secure along the way. She's raised in total around about 800,000 through angel investment, through a convertible loan, through grant funding, institutional investors, and also an angel syndicate. So she's got tons of experience in fundraising. So let's find out how Louise pieced this whole thing together, how she put her fundraising strategy in place, and the important lessons that Louise has learned along the way. So welcome, Louise. It's great to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me.
So let's start back at the beginning. Tell us a little bit more about Yoller. What's it all about? How does it work? And how on earth did you come up with the idea for the business?
I think I'm just the person in my group of friends who makes all the plans. And one day I just got fed up because, you know, you have Uber where you can press one button and a car turns up, and you've got every film you could ever think of within seconds available at your fingertips through Netflix. But yet things like seeing your real friends in real life, it's so complicated. And when I kind of dug into the problem a bit more and thought this is the thing that I care about and I really want to solve, we found that the average social plan takes 9 apps, 22 app switches, 7 to 7 swipes, 13 minutes on the phone, 10 texts, and it fails 40% of the time because it's just too hard. We bring together your real friends in real life really quickly through a combination of machine learning, so being able to predict the plan that everyone's going to say yes to, through some a really unique user interface. So we can take what would be a WhatsApp chat of hundreds of messages back and forth, crazy lack of detail about what's going on, and we can summarize that down into just what's been agreed and what's left to agree. And we give you one platform to do that, and your friends don't have to download the app, they can do it all on web. So it's really unique, and I think that's why we haven't spent anything on marketing at all, but we're growing really quickly, and it's all driven by the product.
That's incredible. I mean, I remember the days when we only had landlines and you'd arrange to meet up with people and just pray that they'd be there.
Yeah.
So this feels like leap years ahead of that. And
I think people often say that technology feels like magic until you actually have it in the real world. And I still think that the complicated nature of getting friends together, it's not just tech, it's actually about the psychology of a group and the secret things that people don't tell you in the planning process. You know, how can you surface those and get everyone to agree as quickly as possible? And that still honestly does feel like magic.
Yeah, if you can simplify that, what is actually quite a complex process, then that's incredible.
Yeah.
And so who are the typical customers for your product? Is it very much the kind of millennials, or is it going across different generations?
We've seen all kinds of people from all kinds of countries planning all types of things, bringing people together in real life, or rather connecting in real life for kind of shared meaningful experiences. Firstly, it's, you know, kind of critical to being human. We're social creatures. And then secondly, I think there's a generation of people, millennials, 18 to 35, where research upon research shows that we value experiences, not things. And 3/4 of millennials want to spend more on experiences than on goods and stuff. And so it feels like the right time to be doing this as well. The world needs this kind of platform. But from a kind of a healthy, happy society, community, you know, real world relationships make you healthier, happier, and live longer, recover from the disease faster. But also in terms of our actual customers, so our users don't pay us, our customers pay us, and our customers are experienced sellers. So anybody who you know, brings people together in real life and sells that experience, we provide a version of our product that is integrated into theirs. So yeah, so it just feels like the right time to do this as well.
Amazing. So how did you get it all off the ground? Did you self-funded it in the beginning, is that right?
True. I'm going to say I made an error, but I don't know if I'd be where I am if I didn't do this. But I took a brilliant consulting gig for a couple of years, and almost everything that I made from it, I knew that I wanted to do this probably 3 years before I did. And I put every penny that I had into saving to make it happen. In the investment world, people talk about like a friends and family round, and it just makes me laugh every time I hear that, because my friends and family were not in a position to give me that initial money, and so I just worked really, really hard. What I subsequently found out through some of the Enter the Arena workshops that I attended back in the day, very early in our journey, is that actually women do that. They self-fund for too long. You know, startups are essentially an asset class for wealthy people. And so there's an expectation that you can go very early on and there's very high risk. But I think perhaps you feel like, you know, I have to get to a certain point before I can ask for money. And I think maybe I should have started asking for money earlier, or at least exploring different sources of funding that even are potentially investment. I think that's actually...
It's a tricky balance, isn't it? I mean, I think on the one hand, you do need to back yourself and be your own best friend. Even if you haven't got friends and family that do have money, you can be your best friend and back yourself. But there's only so much risk you can take on yourself before you need to bring other people in.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't know if it was the right or wrong decision, and time will tell. But things have gone fairly well, you know, in the intervening period. But I think the second thing I realised once I was sort of, you know, underway with you know, prototyping and that kind of stuff, looking for something to show, was I then started to realise how difficult the investment process might be for anyone, but also the, you know, particular set of challenges that women face raising investment. And I realised that maybe an easier thing to do would just be to just go straight to revenue. So that's actually what we did next. So we had sort of self-funded, and then using that initial investment in myself, we then generated our first contract, but before we'd actually built the product at all. And so it was kind of that really early traction that then I thought, well, you know, that initial customer isn't going to take us to profitability, and we still need a lot more to build the platform. And so it wasn't really the significance of the amount of money of that contract. It was more that we had a proof point now that we could go to other sources of funding and say, hey, there is a market for this. And so at the same time, we got, I say we, but at that point it was still just me. I got my first employer, became our first like angel investor. And we also got into Techstars, the business accelerator in New York. And those two things happening at the same time gave us like a really good grounding. Okay, we've got some clear runway now, we can hire a team. And then it kind of just spiraled from there.
So let's talk about that accelerator for a bit. So what was the process to get into that accelerator? Was it a tough thing? Did it come with also some investment for equity as well, or purely an accelerator?
Yeah, so we did Techstars, which is the world's top business accelerator. They've got, you know, they've got an anywhere one where you don't have to be in a location, but they've got now probably hundreds of locations around the world. So it's really accessible. However, it's very hard to get into. I think they have over 1,000 applications for 10 spaces for every single program. So it's actually harder to get into than Harvard. And their criteria for accepting people is team, market, traction, idea. And at this point, I really don't even know why I applied, because it didn't even have a team. So I didn't have the first 3 criteria. The market is obviously massive. we had some very early traction, which was unusual, I think, and that's probably one of the things that swung it. And then obviously the idea was just really exciting. So yeah, but it came with £110,000 investment, and that was broken out into 2 different vehicles. But essentially, one of them is a loan, and the other one is so you give 6%, I think, of the business. It is for £10,000. I think it's changed a bit now, but it's roughly that.
But I think being an accelerator is also a real badge of honour, isn't it? And to be a Techstars alumni, that opens up doors with other investors, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Suddenly we're not just one of these thousands of early stage companies. We've been elevated to this special status of Techstars company. And obviously just getting into Techstars doesn't mean you're an instant overnight success. There's still a lot of hard work, but it makes you stand out, and that really helped us early on. Most companies tend to do an accelerator program like Techstars maybe a year or so after we did, and so it made us stand out even more that we'd managed to get in at that early stage. And it's also, Techstars in particular is a great brand because it's global, so it translates to going to America. They actually understand, whereas some of the other things like potentially the academic advisors, it's not Stanford that where the Silicon Valley investors understand, and so Techstars actually translates and really helps us.
Yeah. So own funding, generating some revenue off the bat, which is a great idea. I mean, I'd always say revenue, you'll never take your eye off the revenue because that's critical. And as you say, real proof of point with the revenue, not just about cash, but proving that the market wants what you've got. Techstars, which came with some money. What was the next step on the journey for you?
So after that, we did a crowdfunding round on Crowdcube. And the reason for that is because I think I sort of made the same evaluation that I did at the point when we had our first customer and thought, this investment process is just so confusing that if I attempt this at the same time as trying to build a business, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. And that was partly based on looking at the stats. So I'm a bit rusty on these now, you'll probably be able to correct me. But I think it's 2 or 3 or very minimal amount of the available venture capital that goes to female founders. But yet when you compare that with crowdfunding, on Crowdcube in particular, I think it was 60% of female founders' campaigns were successful compared to 45% of male campaigns. And it's kind of like it's a no-brainer, where you just go where the odds are better. And obviously for the type of company that we are, that was, it's brilliant to be able to go to get users as well. And I was also excited about doing crowdfunding because it meant we'd have a really diverse investor base, which is something that we want to build as DNA as part of every single part of the company. So yeah, it's hard work. You don't just put a video up and the money comes rolling in. It's a 6-month period. There's lots of kind of process behind the scenes. There are definite levers to make your crowdfunding campaign successful. And I'd say email is a really key one for that. And obviously your video assets, the most hard-working piece of content that you have. Perhaps more so than your deck. And I think actually, I spent a lot of time doing very detailed deck and very detailed financials. And actually you'd be surprised at the power of the storytelling more so than the detail, especially at an early stage. But yeah, so that was crowdfunding was the next stage, and that allowed us to expand the team to actually move out of beta into a live product, and start then obviously shipping more regularly.
But you're right. I mean, I think crowdfunding is the most popular way for female founders to raise money, and it just feels a lot more accessible, doesn't it? I mean, the stats you mentioned. I mean, you're actually fairly bang on, and sadly the stats haven't really changed that much over the last few years. It's still only around 2.7% of venture funding going to women, and still not enough women working in the investment community. But with crowdfunding, I think it's a lot more female friendly. Would you agree?
I mean, there's a conversation there to be had around like typically female skills versus typically male skills, like the bias built into questions by both male and female investors in a different scenario, as in like meetings versus a wider crowdfunding campaign. But honestly, for me, I felt like I'd been through Techstars. I'd read everything, listened to every podcast that I could about how to raise investment. And one of the books I read was actually How to Be Smarter Than Your Lawyer and Your VC by the Techstars founder, Brad Feld. And yet I still didn't feel at the end of all of that I really understood how I was going to do this process. Whereas crowdfunding, they lay it out step by step. So, the first step is you prepare all your documents. The second step is you prepare the marketing campaign. And as a strategic marketer, that's easy. And then the third bit is you're live for a certain period of time and you speak to investors and you have meetings and you go to events. And then the fourth step is that you're kind of in the closing period where there's due diligence and the money gets transferred. But it's that critical point where you have interest but nothing actually signed and transferred, that it feels very grey. Whereas with Crowdcube, there's one definitive time that you're closing and everyone's in or they're out, and you're not the person chasing them, it's the platform. So I think it just really simplified the process.
Yes, and you're so right. I think for many entrepreneurs, both women and men, that securing money through angels or institutional investors, it's a bit of an art and a science. There's not necessarily a very clear linear path to doing it, and if you've never done it before, it's a bloody nightmare to navigate that. So there are extra challenges around that for entrepreneurs. You're right, crowdfunding is much more cut and dry. It's very clear how you do it, but still not easy, is it? I mean, the big challenge for most entrepreneurs actually is getting enough investment committed ahead of launching to make their campaign work. And then you almost go back to the challenge of having to get high net worth individuals and angels, institutional investors on first before you can crowdfund. So you kind of can't get away from that bit. Yeah,
and I should probably also caveat all of this by saying the campaign was very successful, and we overfunded by nearly 50%. I think we went for 250, we raised 380. So it does work, and it was very successful. But I just always try to be really honest with people about behind the scenes. It's not as seamless as it looks from the outside. But yeah, it does introduce you to lots of different types of investors, because nowadays you can have a VC, a syndicate, somebody from a family office, as well as the average person off the street who's just investing £10. So you get access to all these different types of investor, and I think it's a really good grounding for then going on to decide, well, what kind of finance do we need next?
How have you managed the relationship with all of those investors? Because when you do crowdfunding, it brings in hundreds of investors, doesn't it?
It does. So I'm going to give a huge shout out here to Seed Legals, the platform which simplifies all of this. So Seed Legals essentially takes your very early stage conversations with investors and the legal documents behind that. So kind of term sheets or very early documents. And then it links that to your shareholder agreement. It then links that to issuing shares. So any investor at any point in time can go onto the platform and self-serve some of the things that actually otherwise we would have to manage, because with 500 investors, it does get really difficult. And some of those investors we know really well, and some of them are fairly passive, and we don't speak to too much. But yeah, we have regular updates that we send investors, but without Seed Legals, it would be really hard to manage. We have 500 now, so.
I think they're a fantastic organisation, and keeping the legal costs not only, the cost down for entrepreneurs, as well as simplifying the process. They are a great company. We do lots of bits and pieces with them. So good. Okay, so crowdfunding brings in quite a bit of money. That was in 2017, and then you've had a few more bits of funding since then too, haven't you? So tell me about the grant funding that you secured.
Yeah, so essentially we've just looked at all the different ways that you can get money and said, we'll just have a bit of this, a bit of that, a bit of that. And I think that's the right approach when you're battling such ridiculous odds as a female founder. But yes, so Innovate UK, which is the government arm for distributing, funding for startups, has a number of different programs. They call them competitions, and some of them are very specific and very niche for a particular industry. Some of them are like a regular competition that they host, I think, every month or every 2 months. And then they have another arm of Innovate UK, which is knowledge transfer partnerships between a university and a startup. And this has been fantastic for us, because machine learning is a core aspect of the company and the vision that we're realizing. And most companies at early stage are just talking about machine learning because they know it's possible, but actually doing it is a very different thing. However, machine learning engineers and experts are really, really expensive, more so in America than they are here. I think they have a great pool of amazing engineers in here, and Europe helps us. But it's hard to hire that as a very early role. And so these knowledge transfer partnerships allow you to get government funding to partner with the university, and somebody of kind of PhD level becomes a full-time employee of our company Yoller, but we're collaborating. So at the end of it, we'll be publishing academic papers around how we've done what we've done. And they've also had a meaningful experience inside a commercial company with a live data set. So it's perfect. We don't really count it in terms of like money that we've raised, because it's sort of, it comes out regularly over the 2.5-year period, but it's an incredibly tough process. Like the applications, I think they have something like a 70% approval rate to actually award the grants, because there's lots of grants available for this type of project. But I'd say that the process to actually get to the point where you can apply is probably a year.
Wow, it's a long time. I mean, what, you know, for the people who are listening, what kind of entrepreneurial businesses might want to look at that as an option, the knowledge transfer network?
I think the reason it works for us is because or the reason it's supposed to work is because a company has this commercial entity which academics don't really get to experience very often, and the academics are working with the cutting edge techniques in a particular field. So for us, the cutting edge element of machine learning is the reason why we look to academia rather than the open market for the skills that we need. So the type of companies, maybe if you're building a new type of material, or anything that like an academic researcher is going to be able to, is going to be at the forefront of, that's the type of company that should definitely join transfer partnerships.
Amazing. Okay, so that's super helpful to get you on the way. And then the last, sorry.
I was just going to add that there are grant funding available for different stages across Innovate UK. So if you're at like an idea stage, they do, I think they're called feasibility studies or something, where you can get £60,000 to trial. And this potentially is another route that I may have taken if I was to go back in time and think about it, because yes, it's hard to do, but the forms and the requirements to get grant funding is actually a really good process to go through the business anyway. And if I was still in a full-time job and applying for these early stage government grants at the same time, I think that could have been as good an entry point as the route that we eventually took.
That's good advice, thank you. And the whole application process, I mean, you must have become a bit of an expert at filling in the forms.
I kind of enjoy it in a way, because it's like, you know, there's just 10 simple questions, but when you break each one down, there's so much meaning and nuance behind it. And once you understand that and you understand how they ask questions, then it can be quite fun to write. And it's very, very satisfying to put an application in, and even more so to receive the compliment.
Exactly. And then you've also secured some investment from angel syndicates, haven't you? So you've got another route to get a little bit more funding. So was that experience very different from the other types of funding that you'd secured?
Yeah, it was a little bit different. So throughout crowdfunding, we'd obviously spoken to lots of angel investors who were, you know, kind of doing larger checks than crowdfunding might have you think. But syndicates working together to invest larger amounts was something we hadn't explored. And we're very lucky to have Angel Academy in the UK and some other programs globally that back female founders. So that was kind of an obvious next step, because we hadn't done that. And yeah, our experience was a very tightly run process where it was clear what was required of us at each stage. And the first stage is obviously just submitting some documents to say, we think we're ready. Then you go through, and this is my favorite part of this process, actually, possibly of all fundraising, is that they did a live pitch to Angel Academy around a huge boardroom table, but with all of the other founders who were also pitching for investment. So the founders, we were essentially competing against each other. We could hear each other's pitches, which sounds like it would be terrible and sort of like the Hunger Games, but it was really interesting because, you know, you don't get to hear other female founders' pitches that often because there are so few of us. You know, when you go to an event, you might be the only person on the bill. So I really enjoyed that and meeting those other female founders. And there were kind of angel investors sprinkled throughout the table. It wasn't necessarily clear who they were, and it was a really fun process. And then, yeah, after that, you go in and pitch to all of the investors. And then after that, there's a period of due diligence where a data room became important for the first time probably in our fundraising journey. Yeah, ultimately we've got, you know, a great angel syndicate backing from Angel Academy. And I'm sure they'll continue to be supportive as we grow. Yeah,
they're a great organisation. And I think what's happening over the last few years is we are seeing now more platforms for female founders to pitch. So more and more we're seeing, you know, female founder only pitches. You know, they happen at Bright, Beringer do them with Investor, and there's more and more popping up, so it's great. So it is nice, isn't it, when you suddenly feel that you're not the only woman in the room. It really helps.
Yeah. But my favourite part about it though is I guess there's not guaranteed funding at the end of every pitch cycle that Angel Academy do, but it's sort of by exception only that there wouldn't be, whereas with some other female only pitches, there's no guarantee of investment at the end for anybody. So I think they're very rigorous, very established, and they make the process easy as a founder, as easy as they can do. So yeah, that's for Angel Academy.
So I'd like to sort of finish up our interview really by talking a little bit about the difference between the US and the UK, because I know you've been spending some time over in San Francisco, haven't you?
I have indeed. So I guess if you run a tech company, San Francisco and Silicon Valley is like, is this the dream? Just the streets are paved with gold and you just walk over there and people will throw, millions of dollars at you. And I think up until, maybe a year ago, all of the advice, even despite having done Techstars in New York in the US, the advice was don't think that it's easy to go over there and get money, especially as a Brit. We might speak the same languages, but there are cultural differences as well as technical differences in how you raise funding. And so I was kind of cautious about not doing that before we were prepared. And so the way I've approached that is, I went for a couple of days, then I went for a week, then I went for 2 weeks, then I went for a month, and I've just come back from 3 months, and I'm probably going to go back for another 3 months. And it was probably only in the trip I've just done in 3 months where I really understood some of the things I've been told, but had not had a chance to put into practice. So I did the All Raise Female Founder Seed Bootcamp, and All Raise is it's incredible female VCs from across America and around the world, and female founders coming together to create more female investors. So they actually train female VCs, and also to get more female founders funded. And they just have so much momentum behind them in America. They're kind of like the powerhouses that are really exciting to be around. And they took us through everything from, at this moment in time in San Francisco, what is the market expecting to see from you to be able to raise these types of levels of investment? What are the typical market standard terms that you can expect at different stages? What's the current most effective process that people have seen work, and all kinds of different things. And I think some of my big takeaways were what we've raised here in the UK, we might consider seed funding. In the US, that's pre-seed funding. Anything up to $1 million is pre-seed. A seed round is now broken into two. You've got you can call it seed 1 or seed 2 or seed A or seed B, which I kind of hear over here, but they've got something new and cool over there, which is you have your first tranche of your seed rounds, which is say 2 to 3 million. And then you have a mango seed, which is
that's a new one on me.
3 to 5 million. So your total seed round might end up being 10 million, which is a Series A, less than a decade ago. Yeah. But interestingly, the difference I found between San Francisco and London is that in London we're really focused on revenue, and I wouldn't say that investors are risk averse, but they're definitely interested in the detail of what you're going to do next. Whereas San Francisco, they see so many companies, and there are so many massive outliers and also so many people that fail, that they're not interested in protecting their downside. They're interested in how big is the upside, and that's an interesting skill for me to learn, because as a Brit, I think, and also possibly as a woman, my confidence comes from knowing that I have all the details together, and I really want you to ask me the details of how I'm going to take over the world. But investors in America don't actually want as much detail, I found. So it's something for me to learn, to pitch bigger.
Yeah, they're putting more bets and much bigger bets at a much earlier stage. Very interesting. But as a British company, and for other British companies, I get asked should I go over to the States? And I'm always a little bit kind of, actually most investors want to invest in businesses that are near them, that they understand. How have you found that? What have the San Francisco investors been saying to you? Are they keen?
Yeah, we've had a really great response. We're exactly the kind of company that could be funded from San Francisco, because we're in a market where we could reach 1 billion users, and we've got the winds of the experience economy behind us. So, then we're much more likely to raise, I would think, probably a Series A from San Francisco. That said, most of our customers, the market that we understand, our team, we're all in London, and I really want to fight for London as an ecosystem as to why we should build the first billion-dollar consumer product from London, because there's no reason that we can't do it. But there's just this difference in belief, and I feel really energized being in San Francisco. So I couldn't tell you at this point whether we would raise from London or from San Francisco, but I think everything I've learned over there would definitely help me over here if we were to raise from here. But in an ideal world, I think it would be a mix of the two, because I think there are some things that I love about Europe that I want the support in that, and there are also some methodologies and people with like incredibly rich experience building billion-dollar companies in America. So I think you mentioned that people the investors want you to be near them, and whilst that has definitely been the prevailing view, it does feel like it's changing a little bit. You can definitely find investors who are based in San Francisco and prepared to invest outside now. It's not everyone, but I think it will change, especially as we become more attractive the further the pound falls.
It's Brexit. Yeah, that's great. I mean, it would be fantastic, wouldn't it, to see more US funding coming here, and also to get more UK investors taking some of those bigger bets. But that's a bigger cultural shift, maybe. I don't know.
I think those two things are happening, and I think it will happen over the next 5 years. And so for that reason, I feel that, plus also the momentum and change behind funding female founders, I do feel really lucky. Is that the right word? Yeah, like I feel really excited to build this kind of business at this moment in time. It feels like all the pieces are coming together. So
final question for you. So it must feel that you have been doing nothing but fundraising since you launched this business. Do you think you would have done anything differently in that overall strategy looking back?
It's just such a hard question, because it's like sliding doors. You've got no idea what the unintended consequences of something you think would be better would be. I wish I could take my current level of knowledge and go back to day one and realize that you're not expected to have figured everything out by day one. And I think that might have made me ask for more earlier, because at every stage of Yoller's growth, when we've taken on more money, we've done brilliant things with it. We've been able to show that we've grown and we've got this traction, that we're doing something new and that people want it and they're prepared to pay for it. And so actually, had we had 2 or 3 million at the start of the journey, who knows where we'd be now? Maybe we would have spent it all in a blaze of fury and never learned any of these things, and have been an overfunded company. So it's just so hard to say, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's that trade-off between raising a lot early but then potentially doing that at a much lower valuation versus the trend over the last few years seems to have been sort of smaller amounts but more often, which can be advantageous for founders. You sort of take smaller steps, you prove yourself, you move your valuation on each round, but then you're constantly fundraising, and so that can be a time sucker.
It is a time suck, and especially as a solo founder, like you really have to think: is it realistic to be constantly fundraising? Because will the business be able to move forward if all my attention is on that? I don't know if I feel like I've been constantly fundraising. I think that where we've done different types of fundraising, it's actually been interesting exploring them. So it feels like learning as opposed to just like constantly, where's the money? It's a bit different. I do think though that there comes a point where you say, we have all the pieces of this, and we just want like a really big, clear period of execution. And I'm definitely looking forward to that. Yeah. But through pitching and through speaking to investors, you refine your message and your story and your strategy. So it's actually the people that sit around taking meetings all day as an investor, they're some of the most experienced people in the world if you're speaking to the right ones. And so getting their advice throughout that process is, I guess it's like building your own accelerator over a long period of time.
So it's about seeing the journey as a massive part of the learning experience as an entrepreneur, isn't it?
Yeah.
Rather than seeing fundraising as this dreaded, oh God, I've got to do fundraising.
A lot of people say that they don't like fundraising, and I actually do enjoy it. I mean, obviously it's stressful. Obviously, it's highs and lows, and sometimes that can be hard to deal with. But I do really enjoy it, because essentially, if you break it down, what it is you're saying, I've got a crazy idea, and right now you think that you're not going to get your wallet out, but by the end of this meeting, you're going to end up giving me your hard-earned cash. And there's nothing more satisfying than that, because, you know, especially in the early stages, sometimes it's just an idea. And still, even now, like, whilst we can show, you know, all of our traction so far, we're still pitching like the bigger vision. So it's still the same thing. Like, it's just the stakes get higher and the vision gets bigger and the money gets bigger. And I just think it's really exciting. It's fun.
Yeah, I love your approach of looking at it. That's absolutely fantastic. Well, as you say, hopefully the next, I imagine the next round is probably going to be a bit bigger one for you to give you a clearer run on execution. What's happening with Yoller next? Where are you taking the product, the business itself next?
So we're a B2B2C company. So that means that obviously our customers are the people who pay us, and our users are the people who use the product. So what we've built is the platform for our users. So it's live on iOS, Android, and the web. So your friends don't have to have the app to make the plans. So we've built that kind of early stage part of that platform. I say early stage, obviously it was featured by Apple and Google in over 100 countries, and we have users who love us and tell us how much they love it, and come back and make plans every week. And so we kind of feel like that's the bit that we've proven. The second part is ramping up on the B2B part of it. So partnering with experienced sellers and building the product for them, so that we have this seamless loop that can connect the intent of somebody to socialize with the plan actually happening. So that's what's next for us. And then obviously just, you know, $1 billion company, billion users, you know, world domination. But that's why when you spend too much time in San Francisco, you can't speak normally.
I love it. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you dominate the whole world with your product. Thank you. Everybody go and check out Yoller.com, is it? Or what's the best way to find it?
Yoller.com in both app stores. And you can also send feedback through the app. There's a little picture of my face inside the app. We really love hearing from users. So yeah, please download the app and let us know what you think.
Fantastic. Well, best of luck. Come back to us and tell us how it all goes in San Francisco, and we'll catch you soon. Thank you so much, Louise. Really appreciate talking to you.
Thank you.
Thanks for following Fundraising Stories with Female Founders. This content is all provided to you for free, so if you've enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe so you never miss another one. Enter the Arena has helped hundreds of female founders fly through pre-raise and investment and onto the exponential growth of their business. Our first-hand experience, expert guidance, and proven programs help female founders unleash the Wonder Woman inside. To see if we can help you do the same, head over to www.enterthearena.co.uk. I'm Julia Elliott-Brown, and I look forward to talking with you soon.